So today we are going to be starting our series of prep sessions on the GRE. We're going to be doing 6 sessions. We're going to start with vocabulary and writing. Next week is going to be reading and reading comp, and then we're going to spend 4 of those sessions on the math, as we should, because when going into, say, vet school or a health-related program in the future, what section is the one they care the most about? The quant section. In fact, like if you look at UC Davis's vet school, that's all they're really looking at is the quant section. The verbal, not so much. So we're going to do a little bit on verbal just to make sure you're familiarized with what the verbal section is all about. But we're going to spend most of our time in this program looking at the quant section, since that's where you should be focusing much of your efforts. So that being said, let's look at what this test structure is so you can prepare for it. So the schedule for the test is here, and it's actually hard to display the schedule for the test because it really depends. It's delivered sort of like the sections can be out of order. The only section that is guaranteed is analytical writing. You will have an analytical writing section. That's the first thing that you're going to do. You got 2 essays to write, 30 minutes per essay, and you cannot use extra time from one essay to write the other. So you get 30 minutes for one essay, and then you get a total of 30 minutes for the other one. So you can't rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, on that one. Then you get into the next 2 sections, and it could go verbal quant, it could go quant verbal. It is not always going to be verbal and then quant. And every quant section you see is going to be 35 minutes. Every verbal section you're going to get is 30 minutes. Then you get a break. It's optional, but I would encourage you all to take it. Try to go to the bathroom, all that fun stuff. Have a snack. Make sure you're well rested for the beginning of the next half of the test, where you're going to get a verbal and a quant again, and you are going to get another section. It might be quant, it might be verbal, it might be identified as the research section. So you'll get 3 quants and 3 quants and 2 verbals, or you'll get 3 verbals and 2 quants. If it's the research section, they will identify it and it will be the last one. However, if it's your experimental section, you don't know which one of those sections it is. So you got to treat all sections like they are the real deal. You don't know which one's experimental and until you finish, basically, and then you still don't know which one was experimental. You just know that you had an experimental verbal or an experimental quant. So whichever one you have more sections of, that's the one that you had an experimental. It could have been the first, it might have been the middle, it might have been the last. So don't count on the experimental section being in there. So overall, this is about a 4-hour test. So it'll keep you on your toes for about that long. How many here have actually taken a practice GRE at this point? If you're getting ready to study for the GRE, you should probably get a practice GRE under your belt sooner than later. So nobody's taken a practice test yet? Well, the good news is we are going to have a mock test November 17th, so in about a month. So keep your eye out for the registration on that, and you can register for a test, and then we can get you that practice test under your belt. All right, so let's look at another weird nature of this test just to make sure you're ready for it. It's a computer adaptive test. So it adapts by section, as they say. Your first section will be sort of middle of the road difficulty that you get. If you do poorly, your next section will be distinctly easier than the first section, and you're not really going to be able to get out of the 130 to 150 range on your score. If you do okay on the first section, your next section is going to be medium. It's going to feel much the same as the first one you had, and now you're probably stuck in that 140 to 160 range. You want to basically feel like you're getting punished on your second section, because that means you're now in the 150 to 170 range. That means you did well on the first section. So you can do a little bit of guessing where you're at while you're taking the test, but really the goal is crush it on the first section, and the second section should be very difficult, and you're going to not be able to answer every question in that second section. That's generally how it will go. So, but that at least tells you you're on that upward trajectory of the test, of the score. And for your quant, anyway, you're going to want something in the 160s. For the verbal, like being 153 is okay. In fact, the as long as you're in the 60th percentile or higher, you're at a 153 plus on the test, you're okay on the verbal side, because again, they're not really looking for that. How does the verbal break down? You got 20 questions, which are going to be text and sentence equivalents, and then the other half are going to be 50% of those are going to be reading comprehension. So we're not going to talk about the reading ones today. We are going to talk about the text completion and sentence equivalents. Since you have 30 minutes per section, you have a 1.5 minutes per question, and you can jump around. You can move forward and skip a question and come back to it. There's no problem with doing that. So 1.5 minutes seems like a little bit of a long time for most standardized tests, but what you see in the GRE is you see that there's a lot of multi-point questions. So not multi-point, but multi-part questions, of which it actually only counts for one question. It's an all or nothing kind of question. So sentence equivalence can be kind of a pain in the butt with that. So let's look at our first sentence equivalence type question here. So one of the strategies I want you to try to remember and use and apply is read the entire sentence with each answer choice in the blank before you go and select your final answer. So what we're saying is give every answer equal weight. It's really tempting to find a word that you think works and then pick that one and say it's B, but then you get to E and you find out that E is actually a better answer. So it's good to take your time and read the whole thing with the words in place. So let's try that with this question. I'm going to give you guys a 1.5 minutes to try to answer this question. Don't type your answers into the chat box just yet. Hang on to your answers, but then we'll share in just a moment. So try reading the entire sentence with the different answer choices in place. A 1.5 minutes is a long time when you're not actively doing something. Okay, start typing your answers in, but don't hit return yet. Just get your answer choices lined up in the chat box, but don't hit enter. Okay, go ahead and hit enter. Let's see what you got. What do you guys think the answers to this one is? So looks like we're settling in, the majority of people selecting B with F. B with F. So notice how some of the words, the style of words, don't match with the other ones. So like legal entanglements initiated by the government assesses that manufacturers use knowledge in choosing food additives. Does that make sense as a pair? Not really. And like legal entanglements initiated by the government. What does that, on its own, does that even work really well? Legal entanglements? Excuse me. I mean, it could. Legal entanglements is something that it would be, but usually legal entanglements are things that the government doesn't initiate. It's just something that happens. So that's some of the logic that goes into that one. So I don't think that one's a good word in the outset. So I would try the next ones. Legal restraints initiated by the government necessitate that the manufacturers use knowledge in choosing food additives. Knowledge, does that seem like it's fitting? Yeah, you don't use knowledge in choosing food additives per se. So I think it's fair we can eliminate, say, knowledge as well. Legal restraints initiated by the government necessitate that manufacturers use moderation in choosing food additives. What do we think of that one? I think somebody actually picked that. B with E. Use moderation. It could work. It sounds like it works. Legal restraints initiated by the government necessitate that manufacturers use moderation in choosing food additives. It seems okay, but it's not great, right? There might be a better choice, and this is why we want to read all of them, all of the answer choices that we have, and fit them into it, because a lot of people look at that one and they go, that's pretty good. But if you don't use caution, go to caution there, say legal restraints initiated by the government necessitate the manufacturers use caution in choosing food additives, you don't realize that that's a better match. It matches the tone of the sentence much more readily. So that would take out moderation and restraints with us together. And then I should still give weight to the proclivities one. But right away, I can see if I read legal proclivities, like already I'm pretty much done with that answer. That one doesn't make much sense to say legal proclivities. So our best answer is B with F. And that's the thing. Notice I keep saying the best answer. What am I not saying it is? I'm not saying it's the correct answer. I'm saying it's the best answer. So, and there's a reason for that. In standardized testing, there isn't really a correct answer. In fact, the phrase is usually used, the credited response. And the reason for that is because sometimes there might be two answers that are technically correct, like grammatically are correct, meaning wise are correct. It's just that there's a lot of times there's a one that's more correct from the phrase, from the tone of the phrase. And so you should be thinking about tone a lot with these questions. Do the words fit the tone of what's being said, not just does it fit grammatically and structurally? So that's why we want to entertain every single answer that we can to give us the best chance of finding the most correct answer. And notice what I also did was, did I pick the answers? Or what did I do first before picking the answers? I crossed out the wrong ones first. I didn't pick B and F. I got rid of the other answers and eliminated them until all I had left was 2, until I had a B, until I had an F. So this is what we would call the process of elimination. And again, if you're trying to avoid falling for the less correct answers, the ones that don't work as well, then you want to do this whole process of elimination, because this allows you to entertain every answer choice more thoroughly and make a better decision. So process of elimination, read the whole thing before you make your decision. Okay, what's our second strategy we could use? Fill in the blank with your own word before you look at the answer choices. And I know this is difficult. I can do something here that you guys can't do, but actually what I've taught people to do is hold your hand up in front of the answers. I'm not going to show the answers this first time through, but you can hold your hand up in front of the answers like this, and just so you can only see the, like I'm saying this like you can see me. Let me show you. So you should be able to see my video now. You can hold your hand up in front of the screen like this to block out the answers. So all you're looking at is the question stem, and that allows you to untainted look at your answers. Or sorry, look at the question and pick your own word. So the answers will often taint you, and you might favor a certain answer because you like it so much. And this is a way to get out of that. So if you find that that's what you're usually doing, try this plugging in technique. So everybody pick a word that they feel fits this blank the best. And notice that this question is actually asking us for 2 answers out of the list. They will give you instructions like this, like pick 2. So what word do you guys think fits this blank? Just type it in the chat box. Got confident. What else? What else might just stick in there? Anybody else? Pick a word, any word. Egotistical, arrogant, determined, stubborn. Notice how all these words they have something in common so far. That's a good thing. Anyone else have a word that they think might fit there? But see now how you've already read those or heard me say them, and it's hard to get those out of your head. That's exactly why covering up the answers is a good way to sort of get your brain juices flowing. So let me reveal the answers. Taciturn is a good choice or a bad choice? That's a bad choice. Taciturn doesn't mean like confident, egotistical, confident, or egotistical. Come back here. So it doesn't mean that. How about unequivocal? Good choice or bad choice? That's a bad choice. It doesn't fit that. Tedious, good choice or bad choice? Doesn't seem like our plug-in word that we came up with. Egotistic. Good or bad choice? In fact, that was one of the words somebody came up with. How about reticent? Bad choice. How about arrogant? Good choice. So it looks like our answers are D and F. So this is a tactic that some folks can use if they tend to be easily swayed by the answer choices. Just cover up the answers and pick one of your own, and then look through the answer choices and see which one matches. It can also help with those answer choices that are very complicated or words that you don't know. There's a lot of them, because at least now you're getting the meaning into your head, and then you can just see if you can pick apart the words and their structure to see if it compares well. So like if you don't know what unequivocal means, you can at least tell that unequivocal doesn't evoke the same kind of thing as the word confident. Unequivocals you might think, okay, if it's something that's unequal, so there's nothing that's its equal. So okay, I'm not sure exactly what unequivocal means, but that doesn't mean confident. Something that is unequal is not confident. So you can use your picking the answers apart by looking at prefixes and root words and stuff like that, in case your vocabulary isn't very high. But what have you noticed about the vocab here? Easy or hard vocab? More easy than hard right now. And some people out there might actually say this is pretty hard vocab, because everybody's vocabulary is a little bit different. So what's one of the best strategies to study on the GRE is to do a lot of vocab acquisition. So easier than expected. This is not, these I would put in the easy category of problems. So these are not hard vocab yet. They will get significantly harder. And what's another trick of the trade when looking at sentence equivalence questions? Make a note of the transition words. Sometimes transition words, we don't pay enough attention to them, but it'll help us understand the structure of the sentence into which we're plugging things in. So if we're looking at an opposition word, that's things like although, however, rather than, but, supports, additionally, in fact, for example, moreover. So they're like supporting a previous statement. And then a result, therefore, so, when, consequently, because. These are all things you want to pay attention to, because like if the sentence is structured as an opposition sentence, then you're going to have probably antonyms in the first part, this is during the second part. Or if it's, say, support, you're going to have synonyms. Or if it's result, then you're going to have something that's like a cause and effect type pairing of words. So it helps determine what those words choices are. So I'm going to give you guys a minute and a half to work this next question. And again, type in your answers, but don't hit return. Okay, got about a half a minute left. Start finalizing your answer. All right, go ahead and hit return. What's your answers for this one? So we're a little bit all over on this one. It looks like some people are going with long-winded and enthralled. Some people are going with forcefulness, enthralled. Some people are going formulation and bored. So far, I don't think I've seen anybody have the correct answer here. Or sorry, the credited response. Oh, wait, we have one that has the credited response. So using the transition word, what is the transition phrase here? In spite. So what is that showing? It's an opposition. So we're probably looking at having antonyms, or at least they're opposite in meaning. So what would pair up well with long-winded? Long-winded would imply that it's boring. So what word would pair up with it? Probably enthralled if you had to pair it up. What about formulation? What pairs up well with that one? Not really. Like, what does formulation mean in this? In spite of the formulation of his presentation, is there a word that actually pairs well with that one? Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a pair to that guy. Like, that's, yeah, because the formulation is like, in spite of the structure of his presentation. Well, that's neutral. How do you pair up something neutral when you got opposition in play, right? So that's not really something I think we can pair up. How about forcefulness? In spite of the forcefulness of a presentation, what would pair with that one? Forceful, gratified, forceful. They were. I'm not sure gratified would fit. I'm open to arguments that it might. The reason I don't think it fits is because if I'm giving a forceful presentation, I'm very excited, very energetic, right? What's the opposite of energetic? Boring. So actually, I think forceful pairs up quite nicely with bored. And gratified too. Like gratified doesn't seem to fit the mold of this question. Like gratified with the speaker's concept. So they were like satisfied with it. So really what I usually see in this question is people get it down to AD versus CE. What's the better pair of those? CE is actually the better pair. Weirdly enough, long-winded versus enthralled, that's not a bad pairing. But why is this one out? And again, this comes to tone. What is the tone of the word enthralled? Is it very, very positive? Is it very, very negative? Is it kind of positive? Is it kind of negative? Or is it neutral? Like, where does it fall in that spectrum? Like, that's a very positive word, like enthralled. Wow, like that's like just the best thing ever. Does that pair up well with this the tone of this sentence? In spite of the long-windedness of many people, were enthralled with the speaker's concepts and ideas. It's a bit over the top, right? It doesn't match the language that is being used here. Whereas forceful and bored, those are they're positive and negative words, but they're not over the top positive and negative words. Sometimes when you get those really extreme tone words like enthralled or always or never, like things that are very, very positive or very, very negative, they're not good choices because it doesn't fit the tone of the passage or the tone of the sentence that it's being filled into. So tone turns out to be a very big equalizer here. And that makes me say, I'm not going to go with long-windedness and enthralled because that's just too extreme. It's too extreme. So I'm going to go with forcefulness and bored because it's more even. And in fact, long-windedness that's sort of an even word, where enthralled is really over the top word, and so they don't pair well together either. So what are we learning here about the GRE? It's not just the word choice, it's not just picking the ones that work in the opposition, it's also picking the one that fits the language choice, the style that the GRE tends to pick. So what I'm telling you here is, does the GRE as a whole like very positive and very, sorry, let me rephrase that. Does it like extremely positive and extremely negative words, or does it like more neutrally positive and neutrally negative words? Is it more of an extreme test or more of a neutral test? They tend to default to this more neutral position where they can use positive and negative words, but they're not going to be like really positive and really negative. So, and that's not anything that's like described, but according to the length of the test, extreme. Is that, are you saying, trying to make a joke there that like, but they're not showing it because they're giving you extremely long test? Okay, gotcha. So as a whole, the language choice of the people that write the GRE tends to be more subdued. We don't want those really over the top words. All right. Sometimes we get questions like this. Oh my goodness. This is a paragraph. In fact, it's literally got more than one sentence. And this would come on the hard section of the test. And so sometimes when you've got this many blanks, you might not try to fill in the first blank first. You might fill in some of the other blanks first. So don't be afraid of looking at the other blanks before the first one. If you try to always do them in order, it might be more difficult. This is an also good one to try the plugging in of words. So why don't you guys try right now? Think of 3 words that would fill those blanks without looking at the answers. So go ahead and type them in, but don't hit return what your word choices are, because I don't want to taint the word choice out there. All right, hit return. What are your guys' word choices for this one? Or enter. I keep forgetting it's enter now. We got one that's elegant, confident, beacon. Any others? Designer, perfectionist, epitome. And those are actually not that different from each other. Elegant, designer, I think they have the same, they evoke the same thing. Confident, perfectionist, though a confident person might come across as perfectionist. Epitome, beacon. So there we got expensive, confident, source. So we've got a lot, like these sets of words actually all match each other pretty well. So let's see what our answer choices are. Take a minute, decide what you think the answers are. So take a minute to type in your answers, like A, B, C, D. Like pick the 3 that you need to pick, but don't hit return just yet. Give everybody a chance. This would be on the hard question side, of course. All right, hit return. What do we got? Got a lot of agreement on ADG and AFG. What's funny is nobody's picking the middle word correctly. Okay, I think there's a lot of agreement with A. I would agree as well with A. Expensive shirts, immaculate shirts, flamboyant shirts. It's, you know, he's coming across as this egotistical person. He's probably it's from the most exclusive tailors. I'm betting it doesn't match to go immaculate and flamboyant. Flamboyant, I think, is the one we don't want the most. So expensive, I think, fits there the best. But blank 2, nobody does well on blank 2. And the reason for that is you don't read the whole sentence in order to get blank 2. How is he described? Right there is the first word. The first word. Crusty. Crusty and egotistical. What does crust evoke? Crusty man. Kind of none of those, but like crusty. If I have a crusty exterior, I have a hard, hard on the outside. There you go. That's what is evoked by crusty. That's what they're using that word for. I have a hard exterior. Would that give us decorous, irascible, or congenial? Congenial, that's a happy, like, gets along with everybody kind of person. But irascible is the one that matches. Decorous is beautiful. Congenial is friendly. Irascible is easily angered. That's somebody who's going to be crusty, that easily angered person. So it's see how far apart those are, and how like one word actually will, from before the first blank, affect that second blank. This is why these questions are harder. Now, our last one, a lot of people go with G because they think connoisseur of works. What is a connoisseur? An artist or an expert or somebody who's like, I would say expert. Like, oh, I'm a connoisseur of fine, of fine arts. But they're also usually a consumer or a producer. I would put them on the consumer side. If I'm a producer of things, I'm probably not the one like sampling the different wines from all these different places and going, this wine is this and this wine is this. Like a connoisseur of wine is probably a consumer rather than a producer. But this is a publishing house. What does a publishing house do? Is a publishing house a producer or a consumer? They are a producer. They publish things. Which one of these means producer? Connoisseur is more of a consumer. Purveyor is more of a producer. Solicitor, I could even say as well, but we would probably not say solicitor because that has a more positive tone or negative tone associated with it. Solicitor usually comes across a little more negative, but they're saying it's a works of enduring values. So you're probably not going to say I'm soliciting works of enduring values. I'm probably a purveyor of works of enduring values. Now, how is the vocabulary on this one? Would you say it's still easier than you would expect it? No, this one definitely, this steps it up. So, because there's a lot of words in here you may not be familiar with. And it's knowing these, what's the word I'm looking for? Knowing these solid definitions that it's going to help you make some of these more subtle distinctions on these harder questions. There's modern slang that uses crusty as old, gross, and unkempt. And so that might be, but who's writing these tests? Are the modern people writing the tests or the older people writing the tests? Older folks are writing the tests. Not saying they're old people, but like they're using a more traditional dictionary here. So that I totally get what you're saying with like how words modern use would be used. And we have to be careful of that because the way they're going to be writing here is a more formal style, a more crusty style, if I go that way. No, that's a bad joke. A more formal style of writing, which tends to not agree with the more slang usage of words. Like one of my greatest pet peeves is the word ratchet versus ratchet. And so many people don't understand what the difference is between those. What is a ratchet? A ratchet ending in T is a device that like click, 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 holds things in place. But so many people have taken it to mean nasty, like it's ratchet. No, it's Ratched because that was a person in a movie called Nurse Ratched, which finally people understand now because there's a TV show called Nurse Ratched, I believe, right? But like the term ratchet is a perfectly fine word. It does not mean something nasty. But nowadays, a lot of people don't realize that. So it's a good example of how language has evolved over time and how like even a simple misspelling of one letter, the last letter of the word, made a huge difference. And like one was a name given to a character in a book that turned into a movie that has now conflated ratchet with that word. So we've got to stick with our more formal usage of language in these things. Does that make sense, guys? So vocab decks, like if you get a vocabulary GRE deck from, say, like you can use something like, oh, what's the company called? Oh, why is it blanking on me? Blah, blah, blah. It's an app, Magoosh. Magoosh has a good GRE vocabulary app, or you can find a GRE deck for Anki if you're a big fan of Anki, to just get some really strong root word type vocabulary in your mind. And this goes for everybody. Most people don't have a very well-built vocabulary these days. The older you get, the more vocabulary you get into your minds because you'll run into it more. But like you guys have not been exposed to vocabulary like a generation ago was, because of whatever reasons. Schools have not, they just basically dropped vocab lists and things like that they used to do constantly. So you're at a little disadvantage vocabulary wise. You're going to have to do some vocabulary of the day type things. Get yourself built up in your vocabulary, focus on root words, and that will help you for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the essays then in these last 8 minutes. So the two essays, there's an analyze an issue, there's an analyze an argument. On the essays, just get better than a 50th percentile, just get a 4.0 or higher. The essays are scored on this range of 1 to 6. So as long as you get a 4.0, and they do it at half point increments, 4.0, 4.5, 5.0, 6.0. So don't kill yourself on the essays. Just write a basic structure, simple structure essay so it's easy to find the information. You have 30 minutes to do it. So what I usually suggest is plan for 5 minutes. Plan out the structure of your essay. Plan out the things you're going to say, and then write for 25 minutes. Plan for 5, write for 25. So the issue essay is a very simple structure. You're going to be asked to take a stand, make a point, and establish your reasonings why that point is correct. And then I always suggest include a counterpoint. So the issue essay, I say, do an intro, make your 3 points, normal structured paragraphs, and then throw in a counterpoint just to admit that you could be wrong, but don't say that you are wrong, and then a conclusion. Some things to think about when you're writing: be clear, consistent, and concise. So avoid using pronouns if you can, because pronouns are not clear. Use consistent language. Use the same structures in subsequent paragraphs. Be concise. Take out words like that or which. They just make it so unconcise. Stay away from the passive voice, because passive voice adds lots of wordiness to it, makes it harder to understand. No contractions. Use it is instead of it's. Use you are instead of your. Write out all your contractions. It's just a more formal style of writing that you're probably used to. So what do these issue essays look like? Here's an example prompt. So they just say, to understand the most important characteristics of a society, one must study its major cities. So they're making a point. So they're asking you to agree or disagree with the statement and explain your reasoning. That's the issue essay. So how many people here agree with this? And there's no right or wrong answer, by the way. If you don't agree with it, you don't agree with it. So how many people agree with it? Okay, we got a handful that agree. Off of the top of your head, 3 reasons why. Can you come up with 3 reasons why you agree with it? I'm not asking you to actually come up with them, but just think, could you in 5 minutes come up with 3 reasons why you agree? Somewhat. Okay. I would ask the same of the people that disagree. Can in 5 minutes you come up with 3 reasons why you disagree with it? And the reason I'm bringing this up, let's say you agree, but you can only come up with 2 or maybe only 1 real reason why you agree with it. Should you write an agree essay or should you write a disagree essay? If you can only come up with 1 thing that shows why you agree, you should write a disagree essay. You don't actually have to agree or disagree with the statement. It's that they're not testing you on your ability to agree or disagree with something. They're testing on your ability to establish an argument, or in this case, establish a reasoning for your position. So if your position is weak as far as the amount of information agreement that you can come up with, then don't write that agreement. Write it the other way. Disagree with it and tear it a new one. You may totally not believe what you're saying, but will you write a full essay? Yes. So the key here is don't just pick your position because that's the position you believe. Pick a position because it's a position you can support. And because I see people like pick the issue based on what they believe and they can't write in the amount of time a good essay from that. Sometimes it's just easier to write the counter of it because you've countered those arguments lots of times in the past because you do agree with it. So writing a counter essay is often easier than writing the one that you actually believe, strangely enough. The argument essay, I think, is the easier of the two, because what they're asking you to do here is they'll give you an argument and there'll be logical flaws with it, logical fallacies in it. So the thing to do here is you write your intro, you come up with 3 flaws with the argument, and then conclude that like the people didn't know what they were talking about. So here's an example of this essay, of this prompt. So they're woven baskets, blah, blah, blah. Recently, however, discovered paleo, whatever. So write a response in which you discuss what specific evidence is needed to evaluate the argument and explain how the argument would weaken or strengthen the argument. Or the evidence would weaken or strengthen the argument. What am I suggesting you do here? Should you go after the weaken part or the strengthen part? Always go after the weaken, because the weaken is always something you can do. Strengthen is always much more difficult to do. Weaken, I already can just see, like, the Brim River is very deep and broad, so the ancient Paleans could have only crossed it by boat. I don't know if that's true or not. That's a pretty big assumption, isn't it? Couldn't they cross it by river? Or cross it by a bridge, or could have crossed it by walking down and crossed it in a different place, or they could have crossed. Like that's a really big assumption they're making in that statement. It's really easy to pick on that and say this is a logical fallacy. So it's always going to be simpler in these essays to pick on the logical flaws that they have in their writing. So the weekend essay is almost 100% of the time going to be the easier way to write this, because you can always pick things apart. Like, what do we do in our daily life? We pick on things. we're good at that. We find flaws with things all the time. So, but it's always harder to find the strengths. So, and this is really all I'm going to say about the essays. I'm happy to read an essay here or there, but I've had people ask and to do that. I'll agree to doing like reading one essay and giving some pointers on it, but I can't just like read everybody's essays all the time. So please keep it to adult roar, but I'm happy to help you like tweak your writing a little bit for these things.